All right, everybody, welcome back. Let's get started talking about kind of the science that goes into music and the science behind music. We've talked a lot about math, kind of. Math and music go together quite a bit, but now let's kind of talk about math and science and how they go together, because truly, they really, really, really do. So, what is sound? All right, without sound, obviously, there wouldn't be any music. If you can't hear the music, you're not going to want to listen to it, right? Because you can't. Okay, so what is sound? How does sound happen? Now, in this video, they're going to be using something called a tuning fork. This is a YouTube channel called the Slow Mo Guys. You guys some people have heard of them. I have watched a couple of their videos because it's cool to see stuff in slow motion. So they're using something called a tuning fork. Okay, and a tuning fork is something that we use to help make sure our instruments are playing the correct notes. We can talk more about that when we start talking about instruments specifically. But so this tuning fork, you whack it on your leg or on a hard surface, something, and it makes and it plays a specific pitch or a specific note. Okay. Now, how in the world is that possible? Okay. Let's just watch and think about. I mean, you can kind of get a preview here of what's going to happen when if you put that tuning fork in water, but let's watch it and let's see if we can figure out why that's happening, okay?
Oh! Can we do that?
I was filming that. Hello, Internet. Dad, how's the tune?
Yeah, it's good. I think it's A, apparently.
A. Sounds like A.
Sounds like A, definitely. A, yeah.
So I've heard that tuning fork, when you dunk it in water, the frequency vibrates the water in a cool way that looks good in slow-mo.
Yeah, it tickles.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I have some choices for you, Dan. Do you think it will look A, really crap and not good, B, rubbish, or D, really awesome?
Really awesome.
Alright, let's do it. Alright, give it a right whack and
Give
then...
it a right whack. Ready?
Yeah.
Let's go.
Whoa.
Whoa!
You got
Good.
some serious bloody splashback for that, didn't you?
Serious splashback. It's like the smallest little bit of splash in the world.
Oh,
Whoa!
that's severe.
Oh my god.
Might have been over exaggeration. Alright.
All right, so I'm going to play it again, and before it hits the water, I want you to see, you can see that this is moving back and forth really slowly in 1600 FPS slow-mo, okay? In real life, it's happening so fast you really can't even see it, but so watch it in slow-mo and then watch what happens when it hits the water. You kind of already got a preview, but it's so cool in slow motion.
Well.
All right, so you can see, if we go back to right about here, you can see that the two forks of the tuning fork are going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And when they hit the water, obviously they push that water back and forth with them, which is what creates those really cool splash and that really cool ripple effect that you see. So it's really cool. All right, so let's talk more about how that's happening, okay? How does sound happen? All right, all sound is caused by vibrations of some sort, okay? If you hear something, if you're able to hear it, whatever it is, that's because there's something causing vibrations, okay? Whether it's an instrument or clapping or, dropping something. Whenever something is happening to create a sound, no matter what, okay? And every instrument has a vibrating element, okay? So just like I said, any sound that you hear is caused by some sort of vibration. It's the same for instruments, right? Sometimes it is a string. Sometimes it's metal that's vibrating. Sometimes it's just the air inside the instrument that's vibrating. Okay, every instrument is different, and the vibrations are caused by something else, and are, affected differently, but every instrument has some sort of vibrating element. So we've all probably played with something like this before. Okay, this is like a little kid's xylophone. Okay, you take these metal mallets, right? Wooden mallets, and you would hit these metal keys. Okay, and if you hit those metal keys, they're going to vibrate. Okay, and you can't even see it. It's happening so quickly, but that vibration is what causes those metal keys to make sound. Okay, this is a clarinet. A lot of band people play the clarinet. It's a very, very popular instrument. Okay, it's got a little piece of wood at the very top that's called this is called a mouthpiece, and there's a little piece of wood called the reed. And when you blow into the clarinet, you have to hold it in your mouth a very specific kind of way for it to happen. But that wooden reed is going to vibrate, okay? That wooden reed is going to vibrate, and then the wooden reed is going to make the air vibrate all throughout the rest of the clarinet, okay? And that's what creates the sound. And if you look at a guitar, okay, we know that guitars have strings, and you can pluck them or strum them with a guitar pick, whatever you want to do. But when you do that to the guitar, those strings vibrate, and that's what creates the sound, right? Okay, but then what happens? So those vibrations happen, but how in the world do they become sound that then gets to us and reaches our ears? Okay, those vibrations travel through the air as sound waves. Okay, and this is where it starts to get really interesting. The frequency of that sound wave determines if it's going to be a high pitch or a low pitch, or in other words, a high note or a low note. Frequency is how often the wave occurs. So let's just look at the word frequency, okay? You have seen other forms of that word before, probably, right? Like frequent or frequently. For example, my husband goes to Taco Bell frequently. That's because Taco Bell is delicious, and I will never forgive them for getting rid of the cheesy Fiesta potatoes, but that's another story. Anyway, frequency is how often something happens, right? The frequency of it. My husband goes to Taco Bell frequently. He goes there a lot because it's delicious, right? So frequency is how often the wave occurs, okay? And the pitch is how high or low a note is. So when you put those two things together, let's look at this. This first example is a high frequency wave. Okay, so and then this bottom one is a low frequency wave. Okay, you can see that they are the same amount of time, right, from here to here. But you can see on the high frequency wave, that wave is occurring a lot. It's happening 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times within this amount of time here. Okay, so it's a high frequency wave, which means that it's got a higher pitch. Okay, the higher the frequency, the higher the pitch. Okay, it's pretty easy to remember, but you just have to remember that frequency is how often that wave occurs. So you can see it's happening very often in this one. Now, if we jump down here, it's a low frequency wave. It only really happens like twice in this amount of time. Okay, so it's a lower frequency, therefore it's a lower pitch. Okay, so this would be a high note of some sort, and this would be a low note of some sort. Now, in this example, we are going to see and listen to 2 sound waves, okay? So let's get it loaded and then we'll talk about it. Okay, so on this first one, you can see it's a very, very, very low frequency. It's not happening very often, and you can see that it's slowly getting faster and faster and faster and faster until the end it's going to be a very high frequency pitch. A high frequency wave. So what is that going to mean for the pitch? Down here, is it going to be a higher note or a lower note? And then is it slowly going to get higher or lower down here? I don't know. If I had to guess, if we take the information that we know from last time, this is a low frequency wave, which should mean that it has a lower pitch, and the pitch is just going to slowly get higher as the frequency gets higher. Let's see if we're correct. All right, so we were correct. Now let's look at this next example. If you look at this, we've got a high frequency, and it's slowly spreading out and getting to be a lower frequency. Okay, now again, taking the information that we know, a higher frequency should be a higher pitch, right? And a low frequency should be a low pitch. So if we look at this, that means that this should start out high and slowly get lower. Basically the opposite of the video that we saw earlier, right? So let's check it out. So again, we were right. That note got slowly faster, or excuse me, it got lower, and then it got higher, and then the second one was high, and then it got lower, okay? So that checks out. But how do instruments have high and low pitch, right? How can some instruments have a high pitch and a low pitch at the same time? How can some instruments just always be higher than others? Let's talk about it. The smaller the instrument is, the higher frequency of the sound waves, so the pitch is higher, okay? If it's a small instrument, those vibrations are going to be happening a lot faster, and the frequency is going to be higher. Okay, and we know that a high frequency equals a higher pitch, okay? And similarly, if the instrument is large, then those sound waves will have a lower frequency and a lower pitch because those vibrations are happening slower, right? Let's talk about some examples then. Let's go back to this xylophone that we all kind of played with when we were kids, okay? You probably remember that the bigger blocks were going to be lower notes, and then if you were to drag these wooden mallets across, it would get higher and kind of make that zing kind of sound that we always used to do when we were kids and drove our parents crazy. Okay, so if you hit these bigger metal keys, I guess you would call them, okay, they're going to vibrate slower, right? They're going to vibrate slower, and then that means that the notes are going to be lower, okay? And as you move up, if you look at this top blue key, that should be a really high pitch, because if you look at it, it's like nearly half the size of this bigger one, right? Now, if you look at this flute, this lady is holding a flute. Now, a couple of things. You can't see the entire flute, but the flute is probably only about 2 feet long, maybe. I'm not sure exactly how long it is, but it's probably about 2 feet long, and you can see that it's not super wide, right? It's probably about a little larger than the width of her fingers, right? So, if you had to guess, is that going to probably be a higher instrument or a lower instrument than this one? Okay, if you see this, it does have some kind of smaller things, but then it just wraps and wraps and wraps and wraps and keeps on going. It wraps all of this, then it goes all the way around his body, and then again, and then goes up and opens up here. Okay, and not to mention that these little cavities here, these little tubes here are huge, right? You could fit your whole arm in there, right? So this is obviously going to be and we already kind of know this already just by our knowledge of music anyway, but a tuba like this, specifically a sousaphone, but we're not going to talk about that yet, okay? But this tuba is going to have a really, really, really low pitch because of how much room those vibrations have to move around. Once you go here and twist and then go around and then around again and then out, they have a lot of room to vibrate, right? And really, it's kind of the exact opposite here. It's very skinny, and it's only about 2 feet long once you, if you were able to see the whole thing, okay? So now we have an example that we're all pretty familiar with, right? We have guitars, okay? If you don't know how to play the guitar, you know somebody who does, right? It's a very common instrument. Okay, if you look at this guitar, you can see that these strings down here, or rather this string right here, is the largest out of all 6. Okay, they gradually just get a little bit smaller, right, until we get down to this one, which is the smallest of the group, the smallest of the 6. Okay, this smaller string is going to have a higher pitch than this larger string. Okay, so a good rule of thumb is the larger the instrument, that probably means that it's going to be a lower pitch instrument, and the smaller the instrument or the smaller the string, the higher pitch it's going to be. Okay, so let's look at this example. This is a video of a guy who put a camera of some sort inside his guitar and is shooting the strings from the outside looking up into the sun. Okay, this creates a really cool effect where you can see the strings kind of, not exactly, but you can see the strings vibrating, okay? And what I really want you to pay attention to is the difference between these strings, which are smaller than these, especially, and look at the difference in how quickly they're vibrating, okay? I will warn you, this guy's guitar is not in tune, so it sounds really bad, but it looks awesome. So check it out. Now, this is where I really want you to pay attention to the difference between this string and this one. Towards the very end of this little song, he's going to pluck this string and it's just going to wave and it looks super cool. So check it out. So cool, right? It's really, really cool to be able to see like a direct example of what we have been talking about this whole time. Okay, so keep in mind that the higher the frequency, the higher the note, the lower the frequency, the lower the note, and typically, and just as a rule of thumb, the larger the instrument or the larger the string, the lower the pitch is going to be, and the higher the instrument, or excuse me, the smaller the instrument or the smaller the string, it's going to have a higher frequency and therefore a higher pitch. Okay, keep that in mind. I hope you have an awesome day. Thank you for tuning in. Let me know if you have any questions at all. And remember, most importantly, as always, please remember to be kind. Thanks, guys. Bye.